Okay, so the UFO stories that have gotten by far the most attention over the past few years have been the videos that came from the US Navy. Originally, there were 3 of them, called Gimbal, Go Fast, and Nimitz, also called the Tic Tac video. These videos are from the camera screens in the F-18 fighters that were there on the scene. Now, a lot of people feel that what's shown in these videos are extraordinary craft, making movements beyond the capability of anything we know of. And if you don't understand the meaning of all the numbers and other data shown on the screens, it'd be pretty easy to get that same impression. So I wanted to talk with someone who does understand all the stuff on the screens, and who has an even deeper knowledge of the entire scene being presented in these videos. Now, it just so happens that a friend of mine by the name of Mick West happens to be that guy. Ever since these videos were released, Mick has been making appearances on TV and online all around the world explaining what we're seeing. Before he fell into being basically the world's foremost UFO video analyst, Mick did 3D physics simulations in video game development. He's also created a piece of proprietary software called SitRec, which can combine data from many different sources to recreate what's in videos like these. A recreation that's geospatially accurate.
SitRec is a tool I developed. It's called the Situation Recreation Tool. And the idea is that we take a video of a UFO like this one here, and then I make my own version of it by creating a full 3D simulation that's mathematically accurate.
So what we've got here is that's the original video, and that's your 3D recreation?
That's right. And as you can see, it's pretty much the same in terms of the way the cloud moves, and this little object here moves the same way. I can zip through the video, and we can see it moving along. Here's the plane moving along that's taking the video. And here's the track of the object, the potential track of the object.
So how do you know where the plane was? How do you know where the object was? Where do you get all this data?
Well, for the plane itself down here, we get all the data from this screen here. We know what the bank angle is by extracting, using motion capture techniques to extract the angle here. We know the heading of the camera here, 53 degrees left, 2 degrees down. And we can use that to create these lines of sight here. And so we've got the little plane flying along here. And we have its targeting pod, and we know what direction it's pointing in. So we know that the other object is somewhere along all of these lines of sight. We don't know how far away it is, though. So I allow the user to experiment with things like that, and we take this little slider here, and we can adjust how far away the actual theoretical object is.
So let's start with the Navy video called Gimbal.
Right.
What's up with that?
So this is the gimbal video. It looks like a kind of saucer-shaped craft kind of flying over a cloud base. It's viewed in infrared. And the claim is that it's an actual flying saucer, and it's moving with no visible means of propulsion. And it's particularly interesting because towards the end of the video, it does this little rotation here, which isn't something that a normal plane could do.
So what do you think is actually going on?
We've got 2 possibilities here. It could be something that's close to the plane in some kind of weird curvy path back here. It could be doing this weird curve. Or it's something that could be further away doing a straight line. And I think the most likely thing for this particular video is that what we're looking at is something that's actually quite far away. And it's perhaps another plane moving in a straight line. And what we're seeing is the back of the plane.
It doesn't look like a distant jet.
No, I think what we're actually seeing isn't the shape of the object itself, but the shape of the infrared glare from this object. Like if you were to take a flashlight like this one here and you point it at the camera, you get a glare around it, which is a certain shape. And because of the way the camera on this jet is mounted, when it traverses a certain angle, it actually has to do this rotation. And it has to do it because of the gimbal system, which coincidentally is the name of the video, the official Navy name of the video, the gimbal video.
Is there anything in the on the screen that tells you the angle of the gimbal?
There's nothing that tells you the angle of the gimbal, but what you do get is this azimuth angle and this other angle here, which is the elevation angle. And you can use those to calculate what the gimbal angle actually has to be.
I see.
So if you move this along, you can see as you move around a certain region, it has to do a rotation in order to keep pointing in a certain direction.
That one's a really interesting problem because we only have video, just the image of what the plane's cameras were seeing. If it was a radar screen, we would know how far away the object was and how it was moving. But that data doesn't exist. So that makes analysts like Mick have to go the long way around and reverse engineer the entire situation.
I think the most likely explanation is that it's another military jet that is just about 20 to 30 miles away, just flying away, and we're just looking basically up its tailpipe at its jet engines, and that's creating the glare.
There you have it. Probably nothing out of the ordinary at all.
All right, let's look at the video they call Go Fast.
This is the Go Fast video. It looks like something is moving very fast, hence the name Go Fast. We see this little white dot, and it looks like it's kind of zipping over the surface of the ocean. At the start of the video, you see them kind of trying to lock onto it, and then they finally do lock onto it, and now the pod itself is tracking it. So the claim here is that this is something with no visible means of propulsion. It's cold. We see it's white, which means cold in this mode, and it's moving very, very fast. So people get very excited about this one.
Yeah, I mean, it looks pretty exciting to me. How could this be something not moving fast?
Well, the interesting thing about this video is that we get a lot of information on screen. We have here this 4.3 nautical miles range, which is the distance from the camera to the object. And we have this angle we're looking down, 27 degrees. And we have the altitude of the plane here, 25,000 feet. So we can take this angle here and this distance, and we can do 4.3 times the sine of 27. Tells you how far below the plane it is. Very simple high school trigonometry. Turns out it's about 11,000 feet down. Subtract that from 25,000 feet, you get 14,000 feet. So it's actually 14,000 feet above the ocean. It's not down by the ocean. It's halfway between this plane that's taking the video and the ocean surface itself, which means that it's actually moving very slowly.
I've heard people who should know what they're talking about, pilots, military pilots, people in these government hearings, saying that no, what this video shows is something going very fast.
It looks like it's moving very fast, and it's a very compelling illusion. Something that's far away moving fast looks the same as something that's close and moving slow. But you've got to do the trigonometry, and you've got to take these numbers into account, and they're simply not doing that. If they do the math, they'll get the same answer that I do.
But even the pilots thought that this was something extraordinary.
Oh my gosh, dude. Wow, look at that fly.
Can pilots be wrong about something like that? Well, I asked another friend of mine, remember we saw him earlier, Jason Bush, who happens to be an air traffic controller.
So do pilots ever make mistakes like the rest of us?
Absolutely. They make big mistakes, small mistakes every day.
What are some common mistakes you see pilots make?
Pilot might read back the wrong altitude. Obviously see in the news sometimes where a pilot might try to land at the wrong airport. Both civilian and military have done that.
So you're saying pilots are human?
Pilots are absolutely human.
The error so many people make with this particular video is caused by one of the most common optical illusions. It's called the motion parallax illusion. Mick shot this little video in his yard to demonstrate it. He hung this ping pong ball from a tree, then walked past it with his camera. When you zoom in, it looks like the ball is moving at great speed. But the ball's not moving at all, only you are. That's the motion parallax illusion. It's why the object seems to be moving relative to the ocean in the Go Fast video, and it's why the distant plane seems to be moving relative to the clouds in the gimbal video. So I wondered if pilots are trained in this common optical illusion. To find out, I took a flight with another friend, Chris Fries, who's a highly experienced flight instructor.
I'm on the short list. I've got over 3,000 hours of dual instruction given. I've been a flight instructor for about 15 years.
Chris knows what gets taught to pilots and what doesn't.
Do pilots know what the motion parallax illusion is?
Probably not in said term. I mean, flight instructors are trained in the idea of parallax when it comes to the cockpit, but in terms of motion, I've never heard it in any of my training.
It's just a common thing that can fool anyone.
Do pilots make the same kind of mistakes as other people?
Absolutely. Pilots are not perfect, controllers are not perfect.
Pilots are not sky gods. They're regular people. They put their pants on one leg at a time.
What is it that makes pilots, especially military pilots, better observers than the rest of us?
I mean, they have got some unique equipment that the civilian market doesn't have. They've got faster equipment than, the 182 that we're flying right here. But at the end of the day, they're just people flying airplanes.
One of the leading guesses for what that thing is in the Go Fast video is, believe it or not, a simple weather balloon floating along. It could even be a Mylar party balloon. How it looks in the video is exactly how balloons look on that same camera.
I had a student the other day, we were flying along, he swore he saw a drone at 4,000 feet. It could have been a Mylar balloon. I think it probably was a Mylar balloon given the altitude and the like, and especially where it was. I mean, over Lancaster County, Pennsylvania.
I understand that if you're in the heat of flying, you're not necessarily going to do mix-same calculations to see how high that little dot is. But these are military pilots. Aren't professionals trained to be able to tell how far away a dot is?
Controllers are not better at judging the size or speed of a single dot. Something could be up close moving slow, and it could match exactly what something far away moving fast is going. You have no idea what the speed is unless you know how far away something is.
Is a trained pilot better able than a layperson to judge the size, speed, and distance of a single dot?
No.
So in short, all indications are that this was nothing more exotic than a balloon.
All right, so now let's look at the Nimitz video.
Right. So the Nimitz video, shot back in 2004, again, it shows kind of a little blob way off in the distance. And the interesting thing about this video is that this little blob appears to make sudden movements now and again. And people have claimed that the movements it's making are inconsistent with a human craft, like it's accelerating far too fast. The G-forces will be far too intense for a human pilot. So they claim that it makes these sudden movements which are impossible.
Wow, that just went flying off the screen at 1 billion miles an hour.
Yeah, it looks like it's actually moving here. It looks like there's actual motion of the craft. There's a couple of movements in particular, right here, you'll see it zip down from the center to the outside. It's just like hanging out in the middle there, then all of a sudden, it seems to disappear.
Yeah, well, it's on video. I mean, how do you...
If you go back and you analyze these in depth, you'll see that every time it does a movement, it actually coincides with some kind of camera motion. We can see that the person taking the video is actually switching between modes, between zoom levels, between types of camera throughout the entire video. And every time it does that, the camera loses lock.
Is there something on the screen that tells us what the zoom level is or the type of camera?
Right here, it says NAR in the corner. It says one-time zoom. These combined tell you what the zoom level is. This is the optical path that it's using, narrow at the moment, and this is digital zoom. Right up here, it says IR. And in some points in the video, that says TV. Like right here, it's saying TV. And when it switches between TV and IR, you watch that here, you saw that little movement like right there at the start. When it switches from one camera mode to another, it loses lock on the object, and it very briefly just keeps moving in the way it was moving before. So here, we're changing modes, it does a little movement to the side. Same thing happened right there, it just switched modes again, it did a little movement to the side. What gets interesting is the way it changes between a narrow field of view and a wide field of view. Here we're in narrow field of view, meaning we're really zoomed in. And we're going to change to a medium or a wide field of view. And we do that here, and we see it's had to, the object zips off. Now, the reason it's zipping off is kind of similar to what happens with a microscope. When you're looking through a microscope and you change from one magnification to another, you'll see it looks like the whole image is moving.
Yeah, because the lens actually like moves out of the way.
Yeah, the lens, you change from one lens to another, and that's what's happening here. This object isn't moving off to the side. All that's happening is one optical pathway is rotating into position. It's basically an internal thing in the camera, a little prism rotates or a little mirror rotates. Now, right at the end of the video, the one that people talk about the most is this one here. We're in medium field of view, but he's going to change to narrow field of view. It means he's going to zoom in on it. And that happens right back here. So we've changed mode. This indicator lags a little bit. And when the camera comes back up, the object is just outside the bars, and it widens the bars, tries to get it back in again. It's just outside still. Widens it, for some reason it narrows in there, and now it's lost it. It's gone, it's outside. It tries to get it again. It switches to 2x zoom at that point. So this jump here isn't an actual motion. This is actually just switching from one zoom level to another zoom level. Stretch it out wrong. And then the object kind of basically just drifts off screen.
So can we take a look at this in sitrec and see what that object is actually doing?
Sure. So here we have the plane flying along. It's basically flying in a straight line, and it's looking up at something off in the distance. There's this yellow track way off in the distance. And we know that it's somewhere along these lines of sight because we have these angular lines. So a good guess as to where it might be, if we look at this from above, is that it's just way off in the distance and it's kind of just flying away and a bit to the left.
It looks like something moving. It seems to move a similar distance in a similar amount of time as the plane taking the movie.
Yes, you can tell by the fact that these lines here are about the same length, that it's moving at about the same speed as the plane itself, which suggests it's probably another plane.
But if you notice, it's just a weird tic-tac blob shape. It's not shaped like a plane. Here's why.
So here's some thermal camera footage of some jets, and you can see more or less the same shape of the jet there. But when the camera's in a certain configuration, a little bit earlier, all you see is this blob. You can't see the actual shape of the plane itself because the heat of the engine is creating this glare which obscures the shape of the engine. And I think that's what we're seeing in the gimbal video.
So the other one I wanted to ask you about is this green pyramid video where we seem to have giant green pyramid-shaped spaceships flying around in the sky over Navy ships. What's going on with that?
Well, this was a really interesting video. It looks like this video is shot with night vision, so everything appears green. It's not actually green. And it looks like we're seeing some kind of flying green triangle, which is a very interesting thing.
I should say so.
And it is shot by a Navy sailor on a Navy ship, so we know it's the official thing, and we know that it was looked at by the UAP task force, and they tried to figure out what it was. So then we see a couple more. We see a couple more triangles, and then there's some more down here. And they're not moving. They're in a very particular configuration. And the claim was that this actually shows a whole bunch of drones in the sky. Like they said these were drones. That's a drone. That was a drone. All these were triangular-shaped drones.
So what else might they be?
The odds of all these drones being all exactly the same size, shape, and orientation are just ridiculous. So I thought, perhaps it's just lights, and what we're seeing is the aperture of the camera is causing this effect.
Do any of these night vision cameras have that kind of aperture?
And the interesting thing is that some of the night vision cameras do have this type of aperture. Someone on Metabunk happened to look at his night vision camera, and it had this triangular aperture. So this is Jess's camera. It's a night vision camera, and as you can see, the aperture of the camera is triangular. And you can see it is actually a proper night vision camera, 3rd generation. So this is the video that he took with that night vision camera.
It looks exactly the same.
It looks exactly the same. We are seeing flickering lights, which are just stars. And if a plane was to fly by, it was flashing, we would see the exact same thing. And what Jesse does is he adjusts the focus slightly. And when it's just very slightly out of focus, everything in the scene that's a single bright light turns into these green triangles.
So the same thing, you've got some sort of scattered noise, and then the stars are all green triangles.
It looks identical to the Navy video. So right at the start of this video, we see a number of lights, and somebody noticed that there's a particular configuration here. We see a very bright one here, then 2 others here. And someone figured out that this one here is actually Jupiter. And then from there, you can figure out exactly what these other stars are. And it turns out that pretty much every light in this entire video, other than the one that's moving along on flashing, is a star or a planet. So we take the fact that we know where Jupiter is over here and these other stars down here, and we can just basically trace the path across the sky. We can see all these other stars. This one up right here just popped in very briefly. Here's a Russell Hague. And we keep going. We see it pass these 2 stars here, which are the 2 dim things that we see when it zooms all the way in. That's the star Ocap. And we see it just pass by. There we are.
Just an ordinary aircraft with ordinary flashing navigation lights flying along in front of the stars that we see in the sky every night. But one well-meaning guy on a Navy ship films it with a night vision camera that's just slightly out of focus, and suddenly we have fleets of Chinese drones and a national security threat, or aliens flying giant green pyramids. This is what happens when we have this whole cultural mania. Everything is aliens, or everything is Chinese or Russian national security threats. We tend to forget all about having that standard for quality of evidence, and we start to allow in garbage coming from what Mick calls the low information zone.
The low information zone is where UFOs exist. It's the region or the distance at which you can't quite make something out. And if you could zoom in a bit more, if you could actually get closer to the UFO, you'd be able to tell what it was. UFOs only exist because they're in the low information zone.
If there was enough information, they'd be identified.
So Bigfoot is in the low information zone.
Very much so. Bigfoot is in the low information zone. Anything that is naturally blurry, I think you could say is something that's an example of something in the low information zone.
We need to keep our bar high, and we need to stop giving credibility to anything from the low information zone, which by definition does not meet any standard of evidence.